a few more people might be making it in. If we haven't had the chance to meet yet, my name is Grace Fisher. I'm an Associate Dean of Admission here at Reed. I especially worked with students from Hawaii and Minnesota. So hello if any of you are around. And I've been at Reed for 3.5 years. This is my second virtual orientation since last year. So next, I think I'd like to hear from both of we have 2 faculty here and 1 current student. And they're going to talk about the advisor-advisee relationships that you'll have during your time at Reed and how to get the most out of those, because over the summer, you're going to be matched with your advisor. You're going to get a chance to meet them and talk to them. Before that, I will plug this multiple times during the session. You will fill out the academic questionnaire and write a letter to your future advisor. So if you haven't done that yet, it's due June 1st. Start thinking about it. It's in your Iris account. But while we're waiting for that, hopefully we can learn from our great guests about how to get that relationship going and how to get a lot out of it. So faculty, could you introduce yourself, tell us what you teach, how many advisees you have, and one thing you enjoy about the advising process? Mary, you've unmuted first.
I'm Mary Ashburn Miller. I teach in the history department and also in the humanities program, and I'll be teaching in Hum 110 next year. So hopefully we'll see some of you in my conference. The number of my advisees varies. Usually I'll have between 15 and 20. This year, for a weird, strange variety of reasons, I have 7. So they are getting a lot more attention than maybe is typical. I love advising because it's an opportunity for me to meet with students outside of a wholly academic setting. So when I'm holding office hours and meeting with the students in my classes, we're talking about their papers, we're talking about the subject matter. I'll learn a little bit about them, but advising is really an opportunity for me to get to know my advisees as whole people. And it's really amazing for me oftentimes to sort of walk with a student for their first 3 and sometimes even 4 years at Reed. So that's all. I'll turn to Jennifer.
Thanks, Mary. My name is Jennifer Corpus. I teach in the psychology department. I'm a developmental and educational psychologist. This is funny, like Mary, this is sort of an atypical year with advising. I currently have 30 advisees. Your advisor is not going to have 30 advisees. I think like Mary said, 15 to 20 is kind of more typical number. And one thing I enjoy, it's just a minute ago, I was just talking with Grace about a student of ours who just graduated, who came in as a transfer student, and she and I met sort of the summer before she even accepted the offer and kind of worked through possible plans. And then I just saw her last week defend her thesis in her oral defense, and it was just so neat to see the trajectory over that time. And I'm like, you'll meet in a moment Stella, who's been my advisee since she started at Reed and now is about to become a senior. So I think just seeing that process of growth and working with someone over time is really, really rewarding.
Awesome. And Stella, you have been named. Why don't you introduce yourself, your year, your major, and what you've enjoyed about working with Jennifer?
Hi, I'm Stella, is she, her pronouns. As of 9 a.m. this morning, I'm a rising senior, turning my final. I'm a neuroscience major, and I really like, Jennifer as my advisor, but also just advising in general, kind of the same way I liked homeroom in elementary school. It's a nice hub of everything when you are somewhere new and you don't know who to ask a question. It's a nice center point.
Awesome. Thanks, Stella. So we're going to start with some super basic stuff on how Reed academics work. At some schools, one class is 1 credit, another is 4 credits. Mary, could you give us a kind of brief synopsis on some important read nomenclature and general requirements?
Yeah, so I think for the most part, each class that you take at Reed is 1 unit, and it's typical for students to take either 3 or 4 unit semesters. There's one really important exception to that, and that is Hume 110, which counts as 1.5 units each semester. So you'll actually get 3 units coming out of that for your first year. Hume 110 maybe is a key nomenclature. I don't know. Do we all know what Hume 110 is? It's your introduction to the humanities. So it's a year-long course, which I really love because you get to really know your professor and your cohort that you're in that class with for an entire year. I think in terms of the other requirements, basically we have 3 major groups that we want all of our students to fulfill that we think are representative of what we want every single liberal arts college graduate to have at least dabbled in. The first is in the arts and the humanities. We want everybody to take 3 units in those. The second is in history and the social sciences. We want everyone to take 3 units in those. And the third is in math and the natural sciences. And we want everyone to take 3 units of those, including some lab work. And then finally is the 3-unit humanities requirement, which is usually fulfilled by Hume 110.
Super. And Jennifer, can you talk about how students are matched with faculty in the advisor process?
Sure. So, so you will have a kind of a more, we'll probably talk about summer stuff in a minute, but you're going to have some advising support during the summer to get you registered for classes. But when you come to campus in August, you will be matched with your kind of more permanent academic advisor. And we have an Office of Academic Support that really carefully looks through those letters that you all write to your advisor and also considers what your interests are right now in terms of what field you're going to enter. And some of you may have a really clear sense of your major and some of you may have absolutely no idea, and all of that is perfectly fine. But we kind of take what you know about what your areas of interest are, and then you are matched up with a faculty member that shares some of those interests and is ready to kind of advise you regardless of the direction you go into, but that you should have some overlap and interest with. So for example, it's funny, Stella, I don't know if we haven't talked about this lately, but initially I think, now I'm actually motivated to go back and read your letter to advisor from when you were a wee first year. But I think initially you wanted to go to medical school, which you are still planning to do, and wanted to work in like pediatric neurology, maybe? What was it? A specialty within pediatrics.
Yeah, that's what I want to do.
Okay, all right.
Pediatric neurology.
And I'm a developmental psychologist, so I think that was kind of the logical match there that I knew about children and child development and maybe didn't have that medical piece of it. But in any case, there's some common ground there, so that when you meet your advisor, there will be that starting point. Okay, Grace, now I lost the thread. Is that the entirety?
That's great.
Okay.
Yes. And Stella, so it sounds like Jennifer's been your advisor since you started. Is that normal at Reed?
I'd say it's pretty 50-50. My 2 best friends both switched their advisors 3 times. So, and then, I mean, Jennifer's in the psych department and I'm neuroscience. So I had the opportunity. She was like, I don't do your major. Would you like to switch? And I opted to not, because I felt like we had more of a personality match. And I felt really comfortable just staying where I was and felt like I could supplement the neuroscience end on my own. But typically, if you change your major, if there's a personality conflict, like it's not taboo to switch your advisor or anything. It's really easy to do. So I feel like if your advisor is working for you and you're getting everything you need out of it, then you wouldn't switch. But if something is falling short in any thing, usually like around the end of your freshman or sophomore year, you might change your advisor.
Super. And Stella, about how often in your first year, and maybe contrast to other years, how often do you meet with Jennifer?
So most people meet with their advisors when class registration happens. So that's the spring before the next year. And then you register for a whole year at a time, but it also reopens in the fall if you want to make edits to the spring. So I think I've checked in at least once a semester, had like an advising meeting, but also a couple extra times if something wasn't working for me, or I had a question about my classes or just academic progress in general. Yeah, a lot of emails though. Fewer meetings, but many emails.
Gotcha. Especially these days, I would imagine.
I think
very
too,
helpful.
it also depends, like, I think if there's any, sometimes students might want to meet with their advisor. Maybe they're considering different summer internships and they want advice on what makes sense. Maybe they're starting to think about graduate school and they want to, have some advice on where they go. Maybe they're struggling in any number of ways, maybe academically, with their health, et cetera, and just kind of don't know what to do. I think earlier Stella talked about like a hub. And I think that's exactly what the advisor is sort of this central point, so that if you're kind of stuck and you don't know what to do, you just kind of go to your advisor, and your advisor generally will know what resource is appropriate, right? They might not be the person to solve that problem, but they are familiar with campus and they're familiar with resources and familiar with options. So it's just kind of a go-to thing. So some students will contact their advisors frequently, and some just sort of around registration time, depending on what their needs are.
And it's also like big things you check in with your advisor for, but also like as a freshman, there were a bunch of logistical questions that would arise. Like at some point I needed to get my like good student driver form signed. And I emailed Jennifer, I was like, I have no idea who's supposed to do that. I don't even know the building I'm supposed to go to. So the little things that you don't think of right away that will come up eventually, like that's the like source of information.
Super. I'm glad. I assume you have been certified as a good student driver now. Excellent. So let's talk a little bit about these sort of first meetings students have with their advisors. Mary, how do you handle that first meeting? What can students expect?
Well, so this year you'll actually have the privilege of having 2 first meetings. So we might just think a little bit about what might look a little bit different for each one. So this year there'll be a first meeting that will take place virtually over the summer in June, where you'll meet with an assigned advisor and really figure out your schedule for the fall. And I think the main things to think about, I think in advance of that are, do you have a major plan? Do you have 2 possible majors, 7 possible majors, and come with that list of 2 to 8 possible majors to that meeting, so that that advisor can really help you figure out how to keep all the doors open based on that first year experience. I think it's also useful to think about things like, are there languages that you want to pursue? Do you want to continue? If you want to study abroad, is that something you want to start kind of planning for even as early as your first year? I think those are great things to discuss with that advisor in the first summer meeting. And then when you arrive, you'll actually be paired with your longer term first year advisor. And so you'll have a second meeting during orientation week. And that, I think, is the place where I love to speak with my students about what brought them here, what they're hoping to get out of Reed, what a successful year will look like and feel like for them, and how they'll kind of measure, how they'll know when to feel really good about what they're doing, and also how to know maybe if it's time to reach out and ask for additional resources. We'll also often talk about things like the tutoring programs that are here, so that students know right away where you can turn for a little bit of extra help. And I also just really like to talk about the kind of pacing the fall semester. So there are sort of moments at 4 weeks and at 8 weeks where I'll typically, touch base with students and just sort of letting them know that letting you all know that there are these kinds of times that we'll probably want to just meet and chat and check in and see how the semester is going. I think can be pretty helpful. So I think just thinking a little bit maybe about two kind of different meetings, one that will be very strategic and like getting you ready for the fall, and the other where you can, with a little bit of knowledge of orientation, think about what questions you still have about READ and how READ works and what your advisor can do for you in that second meeting in the fall.
Super helpful. And last year was the first year that we started meeting with students over the summer. Before, the first meeting had always been on campus at orientation and no kind of contact between students and faculty over the summer. So Jennifer, did you notice a difference last year or any kind of benefits from moving some of that advising process into the summer?
Yeah, I think what I've noticed before is that orientation is like very exciting and also overwhelming. It's just a tremendous amount of information coming at you at once, and you're thinking about your academic program and the new physical space you're in and all the people that you're meeting and all the like emotional things that are going on. So it's a lot in that moment to first then consider what your classes are and what your academic plan is going to be, and to kind of rush through this meeting with an advisor in some way so that you can register for classes, et cetera. So I think what I saw last year is that could just be more thoughtfully considered. So in the summer, you can think more about the class registration piece, sort of the academic piece of it. And then when you get to campus in the fall or in August, you can focus more on some of those other things that are going on, right? And I think that really helped. Well, I don't know how it felt for students. My sense is that it's maybe hard to not know too much about what you're going to do, come to campus and then just go forward. And I think if you're a planning kind of person, as I am, and I know Stella is, it kind of helps to, in the summer, know, okay, this is what my course plan is going to be like. And just to start to kind of adjust to that, I think is really useful. And also this is perhaps not central to all of your minds, but it helps from the faculty perspective too, because then we have a sense of how heavily enrolled our classes are. We can basically prepare things in our classes better when we have more notice as well. So I think that ultimately benefits students too.
Makes a lot of sense. Stella, do you remember your first meeting?
I do.
Yeah. What did you talk about?
Yesterday.
What kind of recommendations? What classes did you end up taking? How'd that go?
Showed up with my little notebook with my schedule I drew out in highlighters. I think we mostly went over, all the classes I picked out are what I ended up signing up for. So I was in Hum 110, obviously, and then Chem 101 and 102, fall and spring. And then I was in Psych 101 in the fall, and then Bio 101 in the spring, which I split both of those, and it's a thing you can do if you want to know more about that. Pros and cons. So we went over just like my classes and made sure like I had PE on my thing and that my classes were correct, which they were. And also I think I just like had some random questions about like, I think I asked like, when I email a professor for the first time, because I'd never been somewhere with the first names, I was like, do I email like with a first name the first time? And like random things about READ that I didn't understand yet. So I think I had this list of like really tiny random questions that I brought. It's like, I'm Jewish and the high holy days are next week and I don't know what I'm gonna do. We talked about that. So yeah, it was half, I think, my schedule and half everything that was really confusing.
Look, I went to a big research university where deciding between doctor, professor, any other kind of title, or, well, they just signed it with their first name, so can I reply with their first name? Was very, very stressful. So a great question to ask.
Can I add something just to Stella's
Please.
response? That's so fun. As you say that, I remember all those things, but I wouldn't have been able to come up with all that. One thing that maybe comes across is that Stella was super organized. So you may not know exactly what you want to take, right? Because you have questions about it. But you make the most of your time when you have like read through the class options, then you've thought about it and you've thought, okay, this is, I like this or that, and you've looked at whether the times conflict or not. So I think I would just encourage people, you're going to get more information about all of that as we go forward, but there is a range. Sometimes students do come into an advising meeting and they haven't really thought about what classes they want to take. So then we just kind of talk more broadly, but then the end result is they sort of leave my office, or I guess leave the Zoom meeting, and they still have a lot, it's not settled, right? They still have a lot more figuring out to do, and they have more direction than they did. And so maybe, and so that's a reasonable outcome of that meeting, but I think you'll get more out of it, just kind of the more you put into it up front. And it can be that, so there's time to talk about high holy days and how to address professors and all that stuff, right? Because you've worked through some of those other logistical things ahead of time.
Mary, is there anything else you would add on sort of those initial meetings and things like that?
No, I mean, I think one of the goals of dividing this up is to make it so that orientation week, you can ask all Stella's good questions, right? Because you won't have to talk as much about the logistics of what classes you'll be taking. And I would say, I mean, it might even be worth just kind of like keeping a place, like open a Google Doc or pull out your notebook and just like have a place where you're jotting down things that you feel confused about. And if by the time you meet with your advisor, some of them haven't been answered, that's a great place to just, to take advantage of that professor's knowledge and to ask those questions.
And how do you, I've got a question from a student, and Jennifer talked a little bit about this, but how do you advise students who don't know what they want to major in? Like, what kind of classes do you usually recommend they take in their first year?
Yeah, that's a great question, because when we gave some hypotheticals, what is your top major, or 2 majors, or 7 majors? And some of you might have thought, like, I don't even know. I can't even list, right? I have no idea. I would say that was the boat I was in when I started college. I had literally no idea. I just knew I liked to learn, right? So it was very loose. I think it's useful for you to think about the courses and the areas that have been interesting to you in high school, like times when you have felt most excited and most passionate, and you could kind of talk through what the underlying core might be there. So we could think about that. Because I think there's, Mary, I'd like to hear Mary's reaction to this, but I generally think there's kind of 2 approaches. Number one, I do think it's really important that you're taking some things that you feel very passionate about. Like, so you have this kind of passion category, and then you have the requirements category, and hopefully those overlap, right? But they might not. But I think it's not optimal when students are doing everything to meet requirements and they're not thinking much about what excites them, right? So the good news is, as a first year, almost anything you take will meet a requirement. So that's, you almost can't really go wrong. But I would say when you to do, we sort of might think, all right, what do you think ultimately you might do to meet your science requirement? You think you're going to take bio, chem, physics, math, psych? What do you think? And so you can kind of narrow things down in that way, but then also just kind of looking through the catalog, like what sounds super exciting to you, right? And probably it's going to help meet some requirement, and it will give you an experience that feels really what we call intrinsically motivating, right? That is when you're going to excel and do your best and kind of discover where you want to go. I don't know, Mary, what do you say when people just kind of have no idea?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree, Jennifer, and I definitely think it's important to find at least one class that you're really enthusiastic about. At the same time, if you end up only taking art classes, plus U110, because you won't have a choice on that, it's really not going to set you up for success going on. And so one thing I actually, I often recommend is making sure that people are thinking about the long term. So I often have students who are humanities oriented, who are not thrilled about the science requirement. And so they say, like, I would like to wait on my science requirement. And I often will remind my advisees that, first of all, people who wait until their senior year and all of a sudden have to fulfill a requirement that they were not excited about the first year really resent their first year selves. And so just thinking about if if there's something that kind of, you have to get out of the way, maybe this is actually a good time to do it, in part because there's a lot of other first year students that you'll be living with that are going to be taking the same class. And I think it does kind of help have a group and a collective spirit doing that same thing with you. That will not be the case in your second, third, or fourth years. So I do think it can sometimes be useful to make sure that you're doing some of that work that maybe you're not quite as excited about. And also it might turn out that you're excited about it in ways that you weren't expecting, because stuff at college feels really different the way it did in high school. The other thing that I often remind my advisees of is that Hume 110 is intended to introduce you to a wide variety of disciplines. And so sometimes I'll have a student who comes in and says, maybe art history, maybe philosophy, maybe English. And that's great, because in Hume 110, you're going to hear an art historian give lectures, and you'll see what kinds of work they do. And you'll hear a philosopher give lectures, and you'll hear how they think about things and the questions that they're asking. And you'll hear a literature professor give lectures, and you realize that they're taking really different approaches. And so Hume 110 is actually, I think, a really great way to, if you pay attention to the lectures and how people are talking about text, to really start getting a sense of the different disciplines, even if you can't take a class in every single field that you might be considering.
Super good advice, very helpful. And I completely echo, don't put off that requirement that you don't want to do until your senior year. Did that with a couple classes and it did not go very well for me. So thank you for answering that question. What are some, and so maybe you can help with this, like, what are some resources that people can look at to get prepared? Like what are the kind of canonical texts that people can be devouring over the summer so that they can show up at that meeting ready to go?
Read Questions, the Facebook group. I know a lot of the first years, and I guess the new first years, are not on Facebook. I don't know where you all are. I hope you're happy there, but there's a Facebook page group. It's called Read Questions. And you can search any question you've had ever into it, and somebody's already answered it. Yeah, I know there is a Discord that the freshmen use now, but the thing is that upperclassmen aren't there. So if you're looking for a question that might have already been answered, I strongly recommend joining this Facebook group. It might die out if first years don't join.
So what else is there? There's the course catalog. There's Solar, which I enjoy, or is that what it's called? Solar, with the list of all the classes and the times and stuff. There are major planners. Am I forgetting anything?
Solar, you need your pin to get onto, but if you just go to, it's like class-schedule.
Yes.
If you search read class schedule, it'll show you the schedule without needing the pin. You just can't register through there.
Great. And I think also on the registrar site, there was a document that was put together that is a list of, for each major, what your first year and second year might look like too. So that can also be super helpful.
I think that's also a use. Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
I was going to
please.
say, if you're undecided, which is a perfectly fine way to go through your whole first year, but if you're undecided right now, it also can be helpful to look through those major planners and just kind of play that hypothetical game. Like, oh, if I were this kind of a major, these are the courses I would be taking. And oh, that looks awful, or oh, that looks exciting, or right. It can kind of give you some feedback about what areas might be more or less appealing to you, because each major also has requirements in other majors as well that go with it. So you can kind of get a sense of what the holistic program would be.
Super helpful. Let's see. And finally, so part of the academic questionnaire, I think that's for our incoming first years will fill out, is fairly straightforward. I think you're just more listing things you might be interested in majoring in. But in that letter to an advisor, can you give our students some suggestions as to what they might consider including in that? That would be helpful.
Okay, one that comes to my mind is a lot of students will talk about areas of strength and areas where they have concern. So they might, say like, I generally do really well in structured environments, or I really love the arts, or whatever it may be. But I've learned through high school, I have a lot of trouble, managing deadlines, or I have some, attentional issues that I'm concerned about how that's going to play out at Reed, or so, the things that are kind of like, if you have these little lingering worries in the back of your brain, putting that on there, because your advisor would likely be able to say, oh, hey, here are some supports at Reed you might want to be aware of. And I will just flag that supports at Reed are things that people use all the time. I'm not sure how they're thought about in different environments, but at Reed, it's, I don't know. I think in my history, I've seen some schooling environments where tutoring or other kind of support services could even sometimes be stigmatized. They might make students feel as if they are not able to cut it on their own, but it's sort of part of the fabric of what we do at Reed. We recognize that the program here is very challenging. It's really hard to do it on your own, right? So we have all these supports in place, and we really encourage students to take advantage of it, and many, many, many students do. Okay, so that's one thing, strengths and kind of areas of concern. Mary, you were about to say something else.
I was going to say exactly that, especially areas of concern. Places where you feel like you might need a resource and don't quite know where to go. That's great to put there. The other thing that I often find really useful is if people have a sense of kind of a professional plan. So I often will have students who they want to be teachers. That's hugely helpful for me as an advisor to know right away, because I can help them think about, we don't have an education school, right? But I might strongly suggest Jennifer's courses, for example, which might not be something that would sort of come up immediately if I did not know that was part of the plan. I think if there's something that you want to get out of Reed, put it there. So if you want to make sure that you study abroad, if you want to make sure that you can program, if you want to enjoy Portland, if you chose Reed because you love Portland, that's useful for us to know as well, just to sort of help you think about not only your academic career, but finding a balance between the academics and the other parts of your life that make the academics meaningful and that help give you a broader sense of purpose. I think that can be really useful to put in on the advisor sheet as well.
Awesome. That's super helpful. So talking more broadly about beyond kind of these first meetings and preparation over the summer, is it talking a little bit about advisor fit? A student asked, like, what does it mean to have a good advisor fit? And I guess I would ask our faculty, is it okay to change advisors? And what are some reasons that a student might switch?
Yeah, and Stella talked earlier about like maybe a personality fit isn't quite there. In my experience, and I think that absolutely is a thing that happens. I think often it's really about major or academic choices. I don't actually, maybe that's not. This is what my experience is. Stella and Mary can speak to different experiences maybe, but often a student might come in and they might kind of have an interest in psychology, but also in other areas. And then they realize they're going to be an English major or a bio major, or, by the fall of their sophomore year, it's clear they're going into linguistics. And I'll just usually say to them, like, you probably should get a linguistics advisor because I'm happy to continue to help you, but I'm not going to know what I should know. Stella is in neuroscience, which is situated in between psychology and biology. So I know enough about that's one major I'll stretch into, but any other major, I will actually encourage people to switch because they're just going to get better advice from somebody who's in that area. And it's so easy. You literally turn in a form that your old advisor does not even need to sign. So you just have the new advisor sign it and then you're switched. So it's like a non-process. It's very, very simple, but it's not all like, it's not like a breakup, right? I mean, like it could be, I guess, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. There's a lot of reasons why people might switch. Also, some faculty every 7 years go on sabbatical. So sometimes your advisor is that their sabbatical is just going to come up in the middle of your college career and you're going to switch to somebody else. And that happens all the time too.
Yeah, I think this was made clear too, but when you declare a major, your advisor has to be in that major. So no matter how much you love Jennifer as your advisor, if you are not a psychology major, you cannot continue to work with her, although you can still go to her office hours. But you will need a new advisor in your major. So it is very common for people to switch advisors in their second year as they declare.
And this isn't just about like kind of throughout the years at Reed, but how do you advise students who have two very different things that they're interested in, like classics now rebranded as GLAM and math, for example?
I mean, my philosophy is always just to kind of keep as many doors open as possible, right? So if somebody came to me with those two interests, I certainly would encourage them to get started on math because it's actually rather difficult. Some majors are a little bit more difficult than others. So if you think math is something that has to be scaffolded, right? You have to take one class before you can take the next, in a way that is less true of something like GLAM or classics. But certainly, I mean, if I had somebody come in with those, I would say take Hume 110, take a math course, start with your language, right? With Greek or Latin, probably in that case, and then throw in an extra passion course that will either help you fulfill, sort of secondary things to go with math. So maybe a science class, or secondary things to go with GLAM. Yeah, I mean, I think there's really quite a bit of flexibility for redirects. I mean, I think if in your first semester, math clearly is not for you, you might change that second semester a little bit and move into a different set of classes. But yeah, I think it's really just a matter of trying to explore where you need to explore, and keep the doors open for especially those majors that will require a kind of a clear stack of courses one after the other.
And Mary talked about, when Mary's talking about math being hard, right? It's like hard in terms of the way that the classes are structured, not necessarily like conceptually harder than these others. And I think there are certain majors that are like that, right? So like Stella could speak to, for example, the neuroscience major. If you want to be like biochem and molecular biology major, there's certain majors that have just a very high number of units within that major that have to be filled. And those are ones I think advisors we're on the lookout for. Like when you want to do those, we're like, okay, you got to get started right now in that. Other ones like psychology, for example, students could start that major their sophomore year and they would be perfectly fine working their way through because of the way it's structured. So there are just certain ones that you kind of do need to work intensely on. And there's ones that could be, I think many are very compatible if you're considering two paths. If you're thinking about neuroscience and art history, I don't know, Stella could speak to that. That probably would be hard to keep both of those doors open beyond about a year, would be my guess, right? There's going to be points at which you're going to have to make decisions with certain majors that are just very demanding in terms of the units and the structure.
That's super helpful. And I think that's the way I always describe it is keeping doors open as long as you can, as many as you can. And then using the classes that you take as sort of testing your hypothesis of, I think I might like to major in this. So Stella, can you talk a little bit about beyond sort of the literal choosing classes, planning a schedule, how else has your advisor supported you at Reed? Outside of that kind of those first steps?
How hasn't she? Really just does everything. Advisor is really helpful at every fork in the road, I would say. So for me, I think it was a little bit different in that I came in pre-med. So a lot of my I'm wondering about a summer program. I'm wondering about post-grad things. I went to the CLBR, the Center for Life Beyond Reed, right off the bat. And so I think questions that in another situation would have been fielded to Jennifer went there. So I can just throw those into the mix, but those are advisors nonetheless. But really just any point along the way. So even now as I'm thinking about thesis, Jennifer, you're going to get an email from me later today of a lot of questions I've got right now. Yeah, it's classes in the beginning, and then, you know, for me, I take a little bit of time to warm up to someone. So right off the bat, I was like, okay, I'm very professional and polite, and I'm not going to bug her. And I'm like, good morning. I'm awake. Are you? Because I have a lot of questions. Eventually, your advisor becomes someone who is a very like important person in your read life that you know, trust with the big stuff, and she's my first point on any question that I have. So like, I'm not going to thesis with Jennifer, but she's going to field my thesis questions first. It's just like someone who I can trust and who can get me to the right step, even if that's not her.
That's super helpful. And I mean, Mary, since we've heard a lot about Jennifer as an advisor, but Mary, outside of that, those sort of literal course building blocks, what other things do you end up talking with your students about during their time at Reed?
It really depends on the student. And I think that this might be something to think about a little bit, is what kind of relationship you would like with your advisor. I think some people actually really thrive with a little, you know, if I send you an email once a week, you would feel a little bit oppressed by me checking in on you frequently. Other people want a little bit more kind of check-ins and you know, requests for information. But I think, you know, I think I have some students who I will, you know, send an email to twice a semester and check on their courses, and they go along their merry way, and they seem very fine with that. I have other students that, you know, I meet with frequently, sometimes to talk about their hometowns and their career plans and all these other things. Sometimes really to talk about, you know, where to turn in moments of academic stress or, you know, moments of questions, not kind of knowing what to do next. You know, I have from time to time, actually Jennifer and I once together did a monthly advising course. So we actually met with all of our advisees together and talked about kind of big picture stuff like time management and identifying success, and you know, we're dealing with things like imposter syndrome, feeling maybe that sense of being a little bit out of place. We don't always get to do that for a number of reasons, but I certainly think there's real room there for conversations with your advisors. If you are, yeah, I think if you ever are feeling like fitting in is a little bit more of a challenge, an advisor is a great place to turn to. An advisor is also a great place to turn to if you feel like you did amazing on your Hume essay and you just want to tell somebody. Just pop into your advisor and tell them what a great day you've had. They're there to sort of be a sounding board for that as well.
I will also say to that extent, what was I going to say to that extent? Oh,
Celebrate the
no.
wins.
Give me 1 second.
Did you write a great Hume paper?
Boy, did I. Oh, yes. I was gonna say, advisor is also like the grown-up that you get to know when you first come to Reed. And so questions, not even questions, but like, you know, your interpersonal situations and classes, and like, you're not maybe failing a class, but you're just stressed out about it. It's nice to have a grown-up that you know. So it's like, you know, you might call your parents, but they don't understand the class that you're in and they can't relate, and you're really frustrated about something. Like, I've definitely gone to Jennifer where I'm just like, I hate this situation, like, just as a sounding board, because like she knows things and is also like a nice person. And that's, sometimes your advisor can just be a nice person who knows things that you can talk to.
It's nice to have those people. I think with Reed, it's, you know, a lot of students will get different advisors throughout their time because maybe they're switching majors or things like that, or you get your thesis advisor. And I think of it as like collecting people who know you, like a stable of advisors. So we have some questions, if you're all right, answering a couple more. So this is a quick one. I guess, Jennifer, since you're advising someone who is an interdisciplinary major, can students who are intending to go into an interdisciplinary field, like say ES, environmental science, have an advisor in any department within that major?
Okay, now I don't know the answer to that actually. Do you all know? I don't know what the rules are. I think it's a little different from program to program because, like Mary said, your advisor has to be in your major, but actually I am allowed, psychology faculty can advise neuro students, but like a neuro person has to sign off on certain things. So do you know how it works in environmental science?
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say the only thing I don't know is ES, but I know for neuro and biochem and all those, a lot of times people will have a major, an advisor just in like the chemistry side of biochem who's not like a biochemist faculty or like just a psychology professor who's not in the neuro department. You just get someone to co-sign your things that need a signature.
And it might be the case. Oh, go ahead. Mary.
I was just going to say, in ES, your advisor has to be in the subfield. So if you're an ES history major, you actually need a history advisor once you have declared. Prior to that point, before you have declared, you could be paired with anyone kind of across the various disciplines.
And when do students formally declare their major? Surprisingly late, I read, compared to other places. Stella, you know, yes, this trivia?
It's after 16 units so once you've hit 16 units, you have to declare your major, but you can declare as early as the start of your second semester sophomore year.
So basically end of sophomore year is roundabout when you're doing it. Okay. So what's your advice on freshmen who are interested in 300 level classes? And this is specifically about psych for this particular student, Jennifer.
Stella's shaking her head. Yeah, I think, well, let me step back. First semester, you should take Psych 101. And anybody who's interested in psych, probably a significant percentage of you have taken AP Psych or have taken psych at a community college or some other college setting. In every case I can think of in the 20 years I've been at Reed, you still take Psych 101. And so in the fall, you take Psych 101, and that opens the door to almost every other psych class. So that's kind of in contrast to the type of like hard majors in terms of structure that Mary was talking about. Psych is one where like you get that one course and then almost everything's available to you. So we do have some first years taking 300 level courses their second semester after they finish Psych 101. But even that, I think it's much more common to wait until your sophomore year because we have some 200 level labs that are the more common thing to do the second semester of your first year. Stella, what do you think, like from the student perspective?
Don't do it. Quite frankly, I know people who did and they didn't have a good time. Because not only are you, say you take a 300 level psych class your second semester, so you're in a class with all psych majors who've taken the psych labs, the 200 levels. You're not with first years, so you're not with your friends, which plays a bigger role than I think you might think when you're signing up for classes. You might think, oh, I can do it, and you probably can, but you can also do it next year with your friends, and it'll be just as fun. But also, if you are in a situation where you've got such an open schedule that you're like, oh, I'll throw a 300 level class in there, I would take a second to think, is there any other department that you're later going to want to take a 300 level class in that is also asking for a 100 level intro class first? Like, I was looking senior year, I've got open space in my schedule. I was thinking, oh, an anthropology class would be so interesting. All anthropology classes want you to have taken intro anthropology first. So I think, are there doors you want to keep open? And I would do that with that extra time instead of jumping into your high level, maybe it's your major or a class you really want to take. You'll have a chance to do that. I would make sure all your doors stay open freshman year.
Super helpful. Thank you, Stella. Do students usually get the classes that they sign up for or that they want?
With the exception of, I think, intro psych. A lot of and logic. There are are they all going to get the day one sign up when they register for classes? Yeah, so there's a thing where you can sign up for like your top choice class first. So everyone's only signing up for one class, and then the next day you sign up for the other 3 or 2 classes that you want to take. So it's a system that usually works to make sure that you're in your top choice class. And as soon as you get past that intro level or that basic, everybody's vying for the same group requirement class, you're gonna get your classes. It's the very intro level where you might end up on a wait list. And if that's the case and the class is in your major, or you really want to take the class, shoot an email to the professor. Waitlists move, things change. I wouldn't get discouraged if you are put on a wait list. Have a backup plan and know that you could try it again next year if it's not in your major and you just want to take the class. And if it's in your major, faculty will push for you to be able to take it.
One other thing I'll add, just in the case of psych, Stella is right. Psych 101 is very oversubscribed. However, what is different than when you took it, Stella, we now hold between 55 and 60 seats for first years. So I think as an incoming first year last year, everybody who wanted to take it was able to take it. And that was a mixture of intended majors and also just other people who just kind of were interested in psych. So I think as a first year, your chances are pretty good, but Psych 101 is one of those ones that for your first day priority class, if you really want to get in, it would be wise to put it on there.
Super.
That's probably actually a good conversation to have with your advisor for the first meeting, because we all tend to know what classes will fill quickly, even the ones that have a large number of seats set aside. So it might just be worth asking, which one would you suggest that I sign up for first? And they'll probably have an opinion.
We'll send you to Stella. That's what I do with all my, Stella will know.
Beautiful. It seems that the answer to many things is you should talk to your advisor, which I think is the whole point of this session. We're giving that propaganda. I want to, let's see. I guess, so one more question that a student had is, if you're kind of wondering, like, what have other people in a department done in the past? What kind of choices have they made? How did they get different things? Who should they talk to about that? Is the answer your advisor?
Do you mean other students? What have other
Yeah.
students done?
Yeah.
So I would say a couple of things. One is, you will meet upper class students. So, feel free to ask them. You'll have, people in your dorms and in residence life that you can certainly reach out to. Some departments actually have identified student guides that they can put you in touch with, or that will sometimes hold little like Q&A sessions over the course of the semester. So that can be a great way to meet the Stellas of the world who will be able to kind of help you navigate things.
If you're in psych or chemistry, I got you. There's a buddy program. It's mine, and you'll be in it. You could also just ask your advisor, being like, what other advisees do you have? Do you think anybody would like to help me out? And you could send them a dorky little email. You're like, hi, I heard my advisors told you about me. I have questions. Like, you will get a response from most people. And if they don't have the answer, they have a friend who does. Like, upperclassmen don't bite. They might not always want to be your best friend right off the bat, but they definitely have answers to questions, and just also more nuanced things. What's this class like? Would I like this professor? What shouldn't I do if this is kind of how I work? And who am I not going to get along with? If you like are looking for the more nuanced things, just find an upperclassman and you can ask your advisor for help finding one of those. They're everywhere, but.
Yes, about half the student body, I would say. Excellent. Super quick, how do placement tests work and when do we take them? Jennifer, do you know what that's looking like this year?
They'll be, well, there is a little bit of variability across departments and across tests, but for the most part, they'll be happening like remotely prior to the registration. Mary, do you have more detail on?
It's prior to the June registration. And I think that the placement tests are supposed to take place in the first week or so of June. I can see if I can find out more. Just a second.
Well, while Mary is looking that up, and of course we will be letting you know if that is the case. We're going to continue to communicate with you vigorously over the summer. I'll close by saying, reminding you yet again, do your academic questionnaire, do your letter to your advisor. They're both in your IRIS account. We'll do a session on placement tests actually later in the summer, so keep your eyes out for that. We're doing all kinds of informative sessions. And make sure you check your email. And if you in the past used an email that might no longer exist, like it was a school issued email, do be sure to let us in admission know about your new email. Otherwise, we will start seeing things bounce and nobody wants that. So more information to come. Just keep your eye on that communication stream. Any final words?
I'll just throw my email into the chat. If you're thinking about doing neuroscience or being pre-med at Reed, please email me because it's not a lot of people are doing it. So it can be hard to get information, but I've figured it all out and you should get to know that. So please, please, please email me if either of those things apply to you or if you have other questions.
Just welcome to Reed. It's pretty exciting. So we're happy to welcome this new group.
All right. Thank you for coming. A big round of applause to our guests for spending so much time with us on a beautiful-ish day. And we're looking forward to seeing you all at future events about your upcoming time at Reed and eventually on campus this August. Hooray. Have a great afternoon or evening, everyone. See you all later.